Prior to performing any service or maintenance on the clutch, you must first submit a service activity report. Begin by connecting to the vehicle. Turn the ignition to the on position and launch Service Ranger. From the home panel, select the Service Activity Report button and then enter the required information highlighted in red. After the report is finished downloading, close the report and send to Eaton. Next, disconnect the batteries and drain the air system. Following OEM guidelines, remove the drive shaft from the vehicle. Following OEM guidelines, remove the transmission from the vehicle. The clutch weighs approximately 150 pounds and it is recommended that a clutch jack be used. Install the 4 standoff bolts until snug and then 1/4 turn. Remove the 8 retaining cap screws and then remove the clutch from the flywheel. Visually inspect the flywheel for any damage and determine if it can be reused. It is not recommended that the flywheel be turned, so if any damage is found, the flywheel must be replaced. During a clutch replacement, the pilot bearing should be replaced at the same time. Using the proper tools, remove the pilot bearing from the flywheel. If the flywheel is to be reused, thoroughly clean the pilot bearing bore, flywheel surface, and engine housing using a non-chlorinated brake cleaner or other approved cleaners. There are 4 flywheel measurements that must be taken prior to installing the replacement clutch. Both the flywheel and engine housing must meet the specifications outlined or premature clutch failure could result. Remove and replace the pilot bearing as per OEM instructions. All gauge surfaces must be clean and dry. Ensure that all the rust preventatives, grease, and oil have been removed from all contact surfaces. Failure to perform this step could result in clutch failure. The first measurement is the flywheel face runout. Secure the dial indicator base to the flywheel housing face. Put gauge finger in contact with flywheel face near the outer edge. And finally rotate the flywheel 1 revolution. Maximum runout is 0.08 of an inch. Next is the pilot bearing bore runout. Secure the dial indicator base to the flywheel housing face. Position the gauge finger so that it contacts the pilot bearing bore. And finally rotate the flywheel 1 revolution. Maximum runout is 0.05 of an inch. The next measurement is the flywheel housing ID runout. Secure the dial indicator base to the crankshaft. Put gauge finger against flywheel housing pilot ID. And finally rotate the flywheel 1 revolution. The maximum runout is 0.08 of an inch. The final measurement is the flywheel housing face runout. Secure the dial indicator base to the flywheel near the outer edge. Put gauge finger in contact with the face of the flywheel housing. And finally rotate the flywheel 1 revolution. Maximum runout is 0.08 of an inch. Install the pilot bearing into the flywheel using an appropriate driver or using a socket or some other device that fits only on the outer surface until seated against the flywheel. Next, install the clutch onto the clutch jack. The friction disc will be marked intermediate plate and flywheel side. Ensure that it is orientated in the proper direction. Install 2 guide studs in the top position. Next, align the clutch with the 2 guide studs and push until firmly against the flywheel. Install 6 mounting bolts into the flywheel until snug. Remove the guide studs and replace with the final 2 mounting bolts. Remove the clutch jack. The installation instructions shows the torque sequence for the clutch. One tip is to mark each of the cap screws in their order so that you can torque them in sequence without having to refer back to the guide repeatedly. Remove the 4 clutch standoff bolts. Following the torque procedures from the installation guide, torque cap screws 1 through 4 to 23 foot-pounds. Then you'll torque the cap screws 5 through 12 to 23 foot-pounds. And then you'll torque cap screws 1 through 12 to 42 to 50 foot-pounds. And then finally, re-torque the cap screws 1 through 12 to 42 to 50 foot-pounds. This is to ensure the clutch cover is fully seated to the flywheel. Caution: reference cap screw callout image for proper torque sequence used in steps 6 through 9. Failure to follow the torque sequence may result in the flywheel and clutch cover damage. Carefully remove the aligning tool. Using a 1/4-inch punch and a 6-ounce hammer, lightly tap the plate separator pins until they're flush against the flywheel. The release bearing should be replaced with the clutch, but if you intend on reusing the bearing, check that the bearing moves freely with no roughness or binding. Inspect the internal splines for excessive wear or damage. This is a sealed bearing, and if grease has begun to escape the bearing, it must be replaced. Check the finger pads for excessive wear. And finally, inspect the bearing to ensure no damage has occurred between the bearing surface and the yoke. Inspect the yoke rollers for any binding, flat spots, or excessive wear. And if there is damage, the yoke must be replaced as an assembly. The rollers cannot be replaced individually. Remove the yoke by pulling at the top and then the bottom. Inspect the plastic inserts on both the top and the bottom of the yoke to ensure that it's firmly in place and that no damage has occurred. If any damage has occurred, the entire yoke assembly must be replaced. Inspect the splines of the input shaft. If any damage, replace the input shaft. Inspect the input shaft cover for any galling or damage. Inspect the air line between the MTM and the inertia brake. Ensure the line has no damage or leaks. Inspect the weep hole for the MTM to ensure that no oil is passing into the clutch housing. Inspect the front bearing cover for leaks. Inspect the pivot pin for any damage or looseness. It's recommended that the wear sleeve be replaced anytime that the clutch is replaced along with the pilot bearing. Begin by removing the internal snap ring on the end of the wear sleeve. Next, install the wear sleeve removal tool and remove the wear sleeve from the input shaft. Clean and inspect the wear sleeve surface area for any damage. Apply a small amount of grease into the roll pin groove. Install the roll pin. Carefully align and get the wear sleeve started on the end of the roll pin. Using the appropriate driver, drive the wear sleeve until it's firmly against the input shaft. Using a snap ring installer, reinstall the snap ring back into the end of the wear sleeve. The LCA must be in the service position prior to reinstalling the transmission. Begin by removing the LCA. Firmly press the LCA down against a hard surface until it locks. You'll know it's in the service position because of the shortened length. Inspect the retainer and ensure that the pickup is in the rearward position. Next, orientate the LCA and reinstall back onto the MTM. Reinstall the yoke until it firmly snaps into place on the upper and then the lower. Reinstall the bearing. Following OEM guidelines, reinstall the transmission. Following OEM guidelines, reinstall the drive shaft. Finally, start the vehicle and allow the air pressure to build. The clutch calibration will be shown in the driver display, and when a solid N appears, the calibration is complete and the vehicle can be test driven.